This is something that happened when I was 14 years old. Being an only child, I was fairly used to being home alone by myself from time to time. It usually wouldn't happen for very long periods of time, though. But every day when I would get home from school for a few hours, I would typically be at home by myself. One Friday in the fall, I went to school and arrived back as normal. My parents were still gone at work, and they would be gone for a lot longer that night. I can't remember if it was my mom or my dad, but one of my parents had a work dinner event thing to go to. So both my parents were going straight there after work, and they would be gone until that night at about 9 or 10. And they told me this beforehand and left me money to order a pizza to have it delivered if I wanted. So I was kind of excited for that. I was also excited to be able to just watch TV and play video games all night. Or at least until my parents got back. After arriving home directly up to my room and started gaming. Eventually, I went downstairs and hung out there for a while. Then, when I got hungry, I ordered pizza. I would guess at around 7 that night, the pizza guy arrived. I answered the door, got the pizza, paid him, and then went up to my room. I started eating pizza and playing video games, which was a dream night for me back then. However, about an hour into this, and I heard the main front door to our house open downstairs. It surprised me right away because other than my video games and the TV on a low volume downstairs, the house was completely quiet. At first, I thought that it had to be my parents, obviously, but two things were off. Number one, my parents were not supposed to be back this early, and if they were, they probably would have texted me. Number two, I didn't hear them unlock the door. It had simply just opened. As I was thinking these thoughts, I listened and heard somebody now walking into the house. Although I could not hear very well being upstairs and in my bedroom, I thought back to when I had picked up the pizza from the delivery driver. That's when I realized that I thought I forgot to lock the front door. I think I just got the pizza and then went back inside and closed the door, but didn't lock it. I felt terribly nervous now because I couldn't honestly remember locking it. Meanwhile, I heard footsteps downstairs going closer towards the staircase. I thought about yelling, asking if it was one of my parents, but decided not to. I also thought about trying to yell something threatening or fight whoever was in the house if it was not my parents. But I had no fighting skills. I was a skinny 14-year-old kid and didn't have anything really to use as a weapon either. Now the footsteps had reached the stairs, and they were starting to walk up. I got even more nervous, as whoever was in the house was walking up the stairs. I sat there in my gaming chair, basically frozen with fear. My bedroom was the second door on the left once you got up the staircase to the second floor, and my door was not closed all the way. It was open about a foot. After the person reached the top of the stairs, I finally had the thought to close my door, but I felt like it was too late, so I didn't. My door had no lock, and the person would see me closing it, giving me away if I did. So what could I do? I couldn't really think of anything. I looked to the door, and the way the door opened was opposite where the person was. So even though they were now in the upstairs hallway, I couldn't see them, and they couldn't see me. They continued walking closer at a slow but steady pace. I was still sitting in my chair. I'm not sure if I was just frozen with fear and too scared to move, or if I didn't move because I knew I would make a sound, because obviously I wanted to hide under my bed or in the closet, anywhere that would be out of sight from this person if they chose to enter my room. But moving now would make too much sound. However, the one thing that I did have going for me was that the lights in my bedroom were off. I liked gaming in the dark. I should also mention that I had paused my game shortly after hearing the door open and the person entered the house, so that wasn't making any sound. The only noise I heard was the footsteps and the very low volume of the TV downstairs in the living room. The person walked right in front of my doorway. Then, for a moment, I saw somebody come into my view in the open crack of the door. I looked away out of fear. I was sure that the person would open the door the rest of the way, and who knows what would happen, but it didn't. I heard the footsteps moving away. I looked back over and now saw nobody there. The footsteps were now going back down the stairs. Whoever it was leaving, and they were also walking a little bit fast. Eventually, they reached the bottom of the stairs and then went towards the front door. Then they left. When I heard the door close, I ran downstairs and locked it. I looked out the windows but didn't see anyone. They must have gone out of sight. I didn't see any strange cars or anything. It was really weird. I then called my parents, who came home. Whoever had entered the house, though, was long gone. Nothing was stolen or out of place, and I never got a good look at them. I think that it was a man based on the little I saw, but that's just a guess. Overall, I have no idea why this person entered our house. Did they know that the door was unlocked? And what did they want inside? After that, I did not want to stay home alone for a while, but I did. I would have to stay at home after school while my parents were at work, but I didn't stay home alone at night for a while after that. I work from home and live in an apartment. I have my computer set up in the corner of my living room, and that's where I sit all day during the week. My apartment building is pretty new and fairly nice. It's not at all some cheap dump or anything like that. It's located in a pretty populated area, about 10 minutes outside of the city. But there was this one time when something really crazy happened. So it was a weekday and I was at work. Like always, I was sitting at my desk in the living room and on my computer. I don't recall the exact time, but I'm guessing at like 1 p.m. or so, I heard a knock on my door. It was unusual for anybody to be at my door, but living in a large apartment building, it's not a crazy thought, especially with it being right in the middle of the day. I got it from my desk and then walked over to the door. Before opening it, I first looked out of the peephole. When I did, I saw that there were 2 men standing there wearing maintenance uniforms. One of them was holding something, and the other guy had a toolbox. Realizing they worked for the apartment building, I opened the door. The first guy said that they were there to change the air filters, and they would be in and out really quick. I then noticed the thing the other guy was holding was, in fact, an air filter. I hadn't got any emails about them being changed, but I couldn't remember the last time that they were changed, so I said, "Come on in," and let them in. They walked straight for where the air filter was, which was in this small closet that was in my bedroom. The guys said thanks and they would only be a minute. Then I walked back over to my desk and sat down again and got back to work. For maybe a minute total, the guys were in my room. Then I heard them walking out. The door to my apartment opened and shut, and they left. And I was busy working, but about a minute later, I got up and walked over to the door and locked it. Then I went back again and continued working. I worked for about another 4 more hours or so until I was off at 5. Then I logged out of everything and was done with work for the day. I didn't really feel like going anywhere, and I was planning to just order food later that night. In the meantime, I did some small tasks around the apartment. I unloaded the dishwasher or something like that. And then I remembered that I went to take out the trash. We had a room at the end of the hallway for trash, and there was a chute that you would just dump the garbage down. So I took my garbage bag, left the apartment, and walked down the hallway to the end of it. I dumped the trash and then walked back to my place. I was gone for a total of maybe 1 minute. After walking back to my apartment, though, right away I saw someone. There was a random guy in my place. He was just standing in the living room. And as soon as I entered, he saw me. My reaction was to quickly leave. I walked out into the hallway. I remember looking at the door and confirming that this was my place. I didn't accidentally walk into the wrong unit. For some reason, I went back in. I didn't see the guy, but I heard the man running into the other room. I was so confused and creeped out that I just left again and went down to the lobby. There I called the cops. I waited there for them, and when they arrived about 5 minutes later, they went up to my place. After they looked all around, they didn't see anyone. The man was gone, but after answering questions and talking to the police, I realized what happened. The men who entered my apartment to change the air filter did not work there at all. There was no plans for the air filters to be changed that day. That's why I never got an email or anything like that about it. The 2 guys walked in, pretended to change it because I was in the other room. Then one of the men hid in the small closet where the air filter was kept. The other guy left, which I did not see because I was over at my desk where it wasn't really in my view. I assumed that they both left, but really I had just heard one of them leaving. The other guy must have waited around the rest of the day for me to leave. When I walked to take the trash out, he must have thought that I was actually going somewhere and would be gone for a while. Then I think his plan must have been to steal my stuff. That's my best guess, but I walked back in a lot quicker than he expected, ruining his plans. In the end, he just left and did not take anything. Probably because he knew I would know who did it. The man thankfully ended up getting caught along with his partner in crime about a week later. They had broken into different apartment buildings pretending to be maintenance workers there as well. It was not their first time doing it. They had all kinds of phony plots to get in people's places. They would steal anything of value. I'm really glad that I got back when I did and that I wasn't hurt or anything, and I'm glad that the men were caught. This story takes place 2 years ago when I lived alone in this house that I was renting. It was in a quiet neighborhood, but it also had a lot of other houses in it pretty close by. So one night I worked late and arrived back home at about 8 or 9 p.m. I went inside, and after changing, I decided to cook something to eat. I went into the kitchen, which was located at the back side of the house. There, I began to cook, which is something that I enjoy doing when I have the time. As I was right in the middle of this, I heard a knock on my front door. I stopped and wondered who it could be. It was late, so it automatically seemed weird. The only way to find out, though, was to go and look, so I paused my cooking and walked over to the front of the house. There, I glanced out of a window to see who it was before I decided to open the door. When I looked, I saw a man standing there at the step. He was wearing a hood that was covering most of his head, so I couldn't really see his face. In fact, it made him look pretty sketchy because it also wasn't that cold out or raining or anything. And overall, if you want people to open the door for you late at night, maybe don't be hunched over wearing a hood. I thought, I'm not answering. And I walked back over the kitchen. Literally, right as I was walking over there, though, I heard the doorbell ring. This was different than before, because before he had knocked. I just ignored it, though. I was curious as to what he wanted, but I figured that it wasn't worth trying to find out. I was still fairly new to my neighborhood in that particular area of the city, so I didn't know quite how common crime was, and I thought it best to just leave it alone. I resumed my cooking, and the guy did knock one more time. It was like 2 or 3 minutes after he had rang the doorbell. This I also ignored. I wasn't sure if he knew that I was home or not. I had a few lights on, but not all of them, so it wasn't super bright or anything. It made me think that he did know I was home, though, based on how he rang the doorbell right as I was walking away. Still, after the second time he knocked, it stopped. So I figured that he had gone away, and I felt better. In fact, like 5 minutes after I last heard the knocking, I quickly walked back over and looked out the window. He was in fact gone. And then I returned to the kitchen. I went back to cooking, but this only lasted for about 5 minutes, because then out of nowhere, I saw him again. There was a window in the kitchen that was pretty much right in front of me. It looked out to my tiny backyard, which was fenced in. I suddenly saw this guy appear right on the other side of the window, walking towards it. Then he looked right at me and knocked on the glass. It scared me, and I quickly ran out of the room. This guy was a big problem now. I went into the living room and got out my phone ready to call the police. I didn't hear the guy knocking again or anything, though. So after calming down for a minute, I walked back into the kitchen carefully. I looked to the window and didn't see him. Then I went closer and I looked to the backyard and confirmed that the man was now gone. I went around looking out all the windows, and thankfully he was nowhere to be seen. I was really creeped out, though. I still didn't know what the guy wanted, but hoped that he was harmless. Maybe he was just mad that I didn't answer the front door for him. So then he possibly walked into the backyard and knocked on the window just to spite me. Then he left. That was my hope. But what was he doing at my front door in the first place? Either way, I was just glad that he was now gone, and I decided to hold off on calling the cops. I was finally able to finish my cooking after that with no disturbances. I went into the living room to eat and then relax and have a nice evening. I hung out in the living room for a while until I got tired. After that, I got ready for bed and went into my bedroom to go to sleep. So I remember that I fell asleep only to randomly wake up in the middle of the night. I woke up and then sat up to check the time. When I saw that it was 1 a.m., I was happy because that meant I could sleep for a long more time. I was about to lay back down to return to sleep, but before I did, I noticed something out the window. It was somebody walking past it. They were not that close to it, but I still saw them. I got up and walked closer to it. They were walking in the backyard. When I looked out of it this time, I saw the same guy. He was back. Now he was walking through my backyard towards the kitchen window again. This time, I didn't hesitate and I took out my phone and I called the police. I told them what was happening and they said they would send somebody over. I went into the front of my house away from the back and waited. The guy didn't immediately try to break in or anything. I didn't know where he was though, but I didn't want to look. I didn't think it would be a good idea to confront him. The police got there really fast. It was probably like 2 minutes. When they arrived, they found the man still in the backyard. He was caught, but they could not arrest him. Apparently, they just gave him a warning or something. He hadn't broken in, and it couldn't be proven that he was going to, but he was trespassing. He claimed that he was lost. And then I was also told that he thought his friend lived at my place and it was just a mistake. I don't really believe it though, because he saw me in the window earlier that night and then still came back. I personally don't know what his intentions were. I never talked to him, but he was pretty much told to stay away or he would be arrested. After that, thankfully he did, but I still wonder what his plans were and what could have happened had I answered the door for him. This happened not that long ago. It's something that's really crazy, and I'm sure that I will never forget. So it was a normal night, and I was relaxing on the couch watching a movie. For some background, I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment. I used to have a roommate, but she moved out after the lease ended. However, I decided to renew the lease and just live there by myself because I could afford it. I didn't feel like moving all my stuff to another unit, and I decided to just use the extra room as my office, as well as some extra space to store all my stuff. The apartment is on the 3rd floor of the building, which was built in 2018. On this day, I had gone to work like normal, went to the gym, and then came home. I hadn't left after that. So, there I was sitting on the couch watching a movie. It was getting to be pretty late at night. Out of nowhere, I heard the sound of things falling down, coming from the other room. It sounded like from my office, possibly inside the closet in there, but there was also a chance that it could have been from the hallway or from another person's apartment. It happened pretty fast, and the sound lasted for a total of maybe 2 seconds. Instantly, I was nervous, but I told myself that I was just being scared for no reason. I wanted to go look, but was too scared to. Other than the living room, all the lights were off in my apartment. I didn't hear any other noises, so I figured there was just stuff falling over. I did have a good amount of junk in the closet. I didn't know why it would just randomly fall, though, but it was definitely a possibility. I procrastinated going to look and kept watching the movie. However, I was getting more and more creeped out, and I knew that I wouldn't be able to sleep that night unless I went and confirmed that nothing was there. It might sound crazy, and I certainly thought that it was, but I still felt paranoid. What on earth could it be other than just junk falling, though? So I decided to go and look. I psyched myself up and then walked over to the office. I turned on the light in the hallway and then turned on the light to the office. At first, everything seemed fine. I didn't hear any noises or see anything. Then I walked in and went to the closet. The door was closed. It was a pretty large closet, nothing crazy, but you could easily walk in. When I opened the closet door, it was dark in there, but I instantly saw a man. As soon as I did, I just took off running. I could not believe it, and everything I did next was just a reaction. I ran to my front door and left my apartment. Thank God I still had my phone on me. I ran out into the hallways and called the police. I told them some guy was in my apartment. Then I walked around the hallways in a daze until they arrived. I was freaking out because I honestly did not expect that at all. When the police arrived, they entered my apartment. Surprisingly, the man was still in there. He was arrested, and I had never seen him before. He would not say how he got in or why he was there. I'm just glad that he was gone. But I never did find out how he got in. I mean, it makes no sense. My place is on the third floor, and the only entrance is the door. I must have somehow forgot to lock it or something. Maybe the lock is broken. I really don't know. What I also don't know is how long he was in there for. I'm going to be creeped out about this for a long time. I'm just glad that I didn't get hurt or anything. This happened when I was a teenager. One night, my parents went out and my brother went to his friend's house to have a sleepover. So I was left home alone by myself. At first, I was just planning on staying in and relaxing, maybe watching some TV or a movie, or maybe just read or something like that. But I was Snapchatting with my best friend Alexis, and she asked me what I was doing. I told her, and she said I should come over. I guess her parents were gone too, and she was bored. I was too young to drive at the time, and I was not supposed to leave the house when I was home alone. But Alexis lived just a few blocks away, and I could walk there. I figured that I could easily go to her place and hang out for a while, and then be back by the time my parents were home. So I told her that I would come over. I left the house, made sure to lock it, and then walked to Alexis's place. It was maybe like a 10-minute walk. I got there and went inside. We hung out and talked and had some snacks. It was a good time, and I made sure to leave after like 2 hours. I figured that my parents wouldn't be home for another 30 minutes or so, but I didn't want to cut it too close, so I said bye to Alexis and then left. I began walking back home down the sidewalks in the neighborhood. The area was all residential with lots of other houses. By this time at night, it was dark out and the neighborhood was very quiet. Like 2 minutes into walking home though, and I remember hearing a car driving up behind me, but it didn't pass. It just started to drive sort of next to me, but a little behind. When it drove that slow, I immediately found it suspicious. I looked over, but couldn't see the driver. It was too dark out. I just kept walking and hoped that it wouldn't continue to follow me, but it did. I turned and so did the car. At one point, when I turned, the car went past me. I felt better for a moment and thought that it was gone, but then I saw the car turn around and go towards me again. Now I was pretty nervous. I kept walking home and just hoped that I would make it back. Okay, I started walking faster. Soon I was at our street. I got out my keys and was ready to run. When I saw our house in the distance, I just took off. I ran through the front yard, got to the door, unlocked it, and went inside. After slamming the door shut behind me and then locking it, I breathed a sigh of relief. But then I looked back out the window, hoping to see the car drive away. Instead, the car pulled into our driveway. I couldn't believe it and was now really scared again. After parking in the driveway like they belonged there, whoever was driving the car stopped. They did not get out for a little while. After like 2 or 3 minutes, I saw the door open. A man stepped out. He had a slight beard, sort of long dark hair, and was kind of tall. He walked over towards the house. At that point, I moved away from the window and ran into the living room. Soon I heard him knock on the front door. I was terrified. Of course, I was not going to answer it. After a little while, he knocked again. I still didn't answer. I didn't know what to do, though. For some reason, the thought never occurred to me to call the police or my parents. After knocking twice, I didn't hear anything for a little while. So, I went back over to the window and looked again. I didn't see the man at first, but his car was still there. Soon, I noticed that he appeared to be inside of it, but he wasn't leaving. He just kept sitting there. I was really creeped out. Then I saw another car driving down the street. It slowed down in front of the house really slow. I then realized that it was my parents. They stopped, probably wondering who was in the driveway already. Then they started to turn to pull in. The man suddenly then put his car into reverse and backed out. After getting back onto the street, he quickly drove away, speeding in the process. My parents then parked in the driveway, and I ran out to them. I told them what happened, and they called the police. The cops came out, and I talked to them for a little while. After they left, everything was fine, but I never heard anything more about it. so I don't know if the guy was ever found. Of course, I didn't leave the house at night by myself for a while after that. Looking back, I'm really grateful that I was able to get home safely that night and that my parents got home when they did.